In the last model showcase, I showed you why I ended up building 2 models of Thomas. This time, since my patrons have waited so patiently since voting for it, I'm going to share with you how I made the Skarloey railway sheds 3 times. So 9 buildings in total. Follow the link in the description to choose what model you'd like to see in a model showcase next. As with every model, there's some lore to follow and preferences for what version you like the most. The Skarloey sheds are iconic, and have an instant flair of Talyllyn inspiration, both in the railway series and in the TV show. However, they are far from a direct copy of the structures at Pendre, which is down to Wilbert choosing his own preferences and doing his very best to not just make the SR a carbon copy of the TR. Sort of. The Talyllyn railway sheds are not original to when the line was built, as the first loco shed was actually up at the other end of the line at T-Dua. This put the locos not only closer to the quarry they served, but also right next to a free supply of water coming from the stream. However, it was decided that it would be better to have the engines stabled in the bigger town of Tywyn. Much more useful for taking quarry workers up to work in the morning. So the slate shed there was extended, which also had a cottage at the end. This is where Mr. Bowstead, the real equivalent to Mr. Bobby in very old engines, used to live, though it was originally built for the crossing keeper. Short commute for them. Adjoining the single road shed is a tiny workshop space, and jutting out from the central road is a basic wooden shelter to house the 5 coaches. On the other side of the running line, there was once a hay barn shelter, where in the early years of preservation, number 1 Talyllyn was stored. Very old, very much out of the way, and very much worn out. In the late 1960s, with so many new engines joining the fleet, the cottage had a wall punched through, so that the engine shed could be extended. Even today, it can only hold 4 of the 6 steam engines here, not even considering the poor diesels. So, consider subscribing to the Talyllyn Railways YouTube channel to learn more about and support the 75 appeal and how they wish to redevelop Pendre yards for the future. Now, comparing this to the Skarloey line sheds at Crovan's Gate, the immediate difference that I have to keep reminding myself is that it is not made of slate as per the TR. The Crovan's Gate Mining Company didn't start messing with slate until the early 1900s, when the copper began to run out. So instead, the structures on the line are mostly brick. Credit to the illustrators for not changing the iconic site of Dolgok water column. I'm not sure I'm ready to see that made of brick, it just wouldn't look the same. Anyway, in very old engines, we get a look at what was originally here, being a single line brick loco shed and a carriage shed beyond. The running line runs to the right side of it instead, on a curve going past the manager's house. The entire site is on a raised wharf, so that the narrow gauge trucks can exchange with the big railway. It is very much a mix of wharf and Pendre mashed into one. To this end, a barn-like hut was tacked on to the loco shed to provide some shelter for the goods, useful for keeping things like gunpowder all dry. By 4 little engines, with goods trains and engines past their heyday, This becomes Skarloey's little shed out of the way. And it remains like that alongside Rusty. It's like they don't mind taking the worst seat on the couch so that the others can stay comfortable. It's very sweet. As there wasn't a house to extend the shed into, instead Wilbert writes that the manager's house is demolished, and the line now sweeps over it in a more gentle curve. Meanwhile, the new engines budge up as the loco shed somehow has room for a second line to be added. The original carriage shed remains much the same, but beyond is a much larger workshop and rolling stock shed, which is constructed after 1954. In the TV series, to make it easier to pose all of the engines together, Skarloey's shack is double-tracked, as is the carriage shed, and the whole set is mirrored. So, that's the basis. Time to actually make it.
Hello, Jane. How are those headaches of yours? Are you off to see the doctors?
No, Doris, I'm off to Wales. There's an extravagant event on that's celebrating 80 years of the railway series.
Oh, we've got one of those special events here too. Look, this new North Western Railway poster tells you all about it. There's a lot going on.
Oh, how lovely. Oh, I wish I had a copy of that to take with me.
Oh, Jane, haven't you heard? There's a new shop, so you can buy these railway posters for yourself. You can find them at kumartajdg.com/shop. They come in either A3 or A4 sizes.
I'm not so sure. I've just spent a few thousand and mortgaged my house on some TV series props.
Jane, what are you like? If you use the code happy_80th before the 27th of June 2025, you get 15% off all Sutrian posters by Kumata JDG.
Really? Even this one with these smiling blue engines?
Smiling? What do you mean, Jane? They're just machines.
Oh, but all locomotives have faces, don't they? Oh.
I think you need to see about getting those headaches sorted, Jane.
There doesn't seem to be a poster for that. Oh, how sad.
Celebrate the 80th anniversary of everyone's second favourite blue engine. Get yourself an NWR poster with 15% off at kumartajdg.com/shop.
My original attempt at modelling the sheds was following the TV series approach, way back in 2016, to use with ERTL diecasts rather than with 009 models. I'd say the level of detail matches that. The walls were made from MDF sheets, whereas the arches and roofs were made from card. Tabs folded into the corners helped to secure everything together. Skarloey's shack was formed from coffee stirrers, on card triangles, with matchsticks for the roof. Metcalfe brick sheets were then cut and added to the other structures. Much like the ERTL range, the windows were not properly cut out, but stuck on top and painted grey to imitate glass. The most fun, yet tedious bit, was gluing individual squares of card to form the slate roof. These were deliberately mix-match to show how the buildings had aged. Raised bricks for the archways were also added, and the whole thing weathered by dry brushing acrylics. For my ERTL stage, this set was perfectly fun to use, but when I started getting into 009 scale modelling, I wanted to have another go. To push myself to do a better job, I sold the original sheds to Lou Raccoon. So if I ever wanted to film on this set again, I'd have to make it again first. For my second attempt, I opted for the Railway Series look, with the exception of a double-track Skarloey shack, which is very amusing to say. As before, each is made separately so that they can be moved around and repurposed. I went for heavy cardstock as the base instead, as I used Will's kits for the brickwork. I measured everything based on how the rolling stock would be stored, so the entire vintage set could be housed as one. It was also important to make sure that even with the rails and ballast, there was still enough room for the tallest locos. The plastic sheets were drawn on together to get the window spacing right, and to match up the brickwork. Windows were cut for ratio kits to be added, after a painfully long time drilling through the plastic. The windows were painted and they had their glass added. For the roof supports, I made a girder template and copied that several times so that there was a bit more to look at up in the rafters, because this time I was going to make an interior as well. Since the loco shed is obscured on one side, I made a removable wall to open up the possibilities for filming. This was done with a wooden frame made all along the side, and a small strip of plasticard to border it so that the wall would stay in place. Now the wall can be poked outwards to get the camera into the shed, and put back again to film the exterior. I feel like an estate agent talking like this. This roomly Victorian property can hold up to 6 steam engines. No. The longitudinal roof sections were cut first, with the fronts being glued to fit. The plasticard sheets were then stuck over this frame. On the carriage shed, a template for the front was repeated several times along the shed so that it was extra strong. Using offcuts along the wall, I put an extra raised line across the sides. This allowed the wooden timbers to stick out more from the slate wall that will go along the floor. Dressed stone block sheeting did the job, then the therapeutic job of cutting coffee stirrers for the planks. I had a spare window, so I put that on the unseen side just to vary the look. The roof tiles were not cut individually like the first time, but in 5mm rows, with scissors scoring into them. Each line was layered, still with a few tiles picked out to show deterioration. Guttering was made from cotton sticks, with a drain pipe running down the wall. What the Railway Series carriage shed has that the TV Series one doesn't is doors, which I wanted to be openable. Small sections were cut out of mountboard so that they wouldn't clip into the rails. A 00 figure was used to scale how big the door would be, which in itself will be on the door. Bit of a paradox.
Ooh.
Little hoops of wire and electrical cable were twisted to become the hinges. For the smaller door, black tape was stuck to the back so that it could be posed open or shut. Skarloey's shack was made a similar way to before, with 5mm basswood for the frame instead. Corrugated card was divided into sections to make it seem like the roof was sheeted in smaller pieces. Finally, they are ready for painting. The windows were blocked out with masking tape, and then Revel Brown sprayed over the brickwork. This was the first time that I've tried painting 3D embossed brick, but I felt that adding the mortar lines would really help to make the model stand out. For that, I used Revel Beige Aquacolor. I coated one wall at a time and let it dry for a minute, before dipping a cotton stick into some enamel thinner. This is so boring, I'm talking about bricks. Going through many cotton sticks, scrubbing off the paint diagonally left the beige paint in the cement and not on the bricks themselves. The colours were then darkened by dry brushing brown and grey shades over the top. For a first attempt, I'm really pleased with how this technique has turned out. The roofs were painted a blue-grey to look like slate, and the timber a faded mustard colour. To add a bit of interest, I glued some wire to a piece of card to essentially make a coat hook. Pendre Sheds has a row of hooks on the carriage shed to hold fire irons and shovels, so it made sense to me that this yard would have the same. That is how I made the sheds, as they appear in my recent narrow gauge mini-series, Clever Little Engine. So, why on earth did I make them all a third time? The Midland Terrier got into a 009 scale phase, cause haven't we all, and asked if I could make them a set as well. So, since I had the measurements already written, I thought, why not? They asked for a slightly simplified version, but the main structures were built the same. By their request, I went back to using Metcalfe brick sheets, both red brick and dry stone. The good thing about making this set a third time was that I could make Skarloey's shack single track like it is in the books. I can now also show you the templates for how everything was cut more easily. Many more coffee stirrers later, a more faded wood colour was used to finish them off. These are in an unweathered state, and are almost an amalgamation of my first and second attempts together. I guess this is what it would look like if the Skarloey did a major expansion project and redeveloped the existing yard, like the 75 appeal at the Talyllyn Railway. Well, that's how I made a home of happy little engines. 3 times. You can see them in my mini Little Railway series, Clever Little Engine. Head on over to join my Patreon by following the link in the description, and you can vote on what model you'd like to see in a showcase next. The poll is now live. See you then. A big thank you to the following channel patrons: Alex Goodman, GBH Train, D0280 Falcon, Sean Tempest, Random Thomas Fan, Dark White 73, Andrew Dyack, Reese Lee Walter, Ryan RTS, Ewan Pentland, Steam Power 4472, Jude 72, Firewind 10, Luneacres Photography, Mario Sonic 64, Elias, Soda Fox Art, TJOC 9891, Tamsy, and Insane Edward.